Hello everyone. In this video, we will be diving in to Merlin, everything about him. Just as before, I did the Lady of the Lake, and now we will be focusing on the enchanting wizard, Merlin, and everything about him. So, here we go. The intro. Merlin. In Welsh, it is Merlin. Cornish, Merdhin. In Breton, Merzin, is a mythical figure prominently featured in the legend of King Arthur and best known as a magician, with several other main roles. The familiar depiction of Merlin, based on an amalgamation of historic and legendary figures, was introduced by the 12th century British pseudo-historical author Gorfey of Monmouth, and then built on the French poet Robert de Baron and prose successors in the 13th century. Gorfey seems to have combined earlier Welsh tales of Merlin and Ambrosius, two legendary Briton prophets with no connection to Arthur, to form the complete composition figure that he called Merlinus Ambrosius. His rendering of the character became immediately popular, especially in Wales. Later chronicle and romance writers in France and elsewhere expanded on the account to produce a fuller, more multifaceted image, creating one of the most important figures in the imagination and literature of the Middle Ages. Merlin's birth. Merlin's traditional biography casts him as an often mad Camban, born of a mortal woman and an incubus, from when he inherits his supernatural powers and abilities. An incubus is a demonic entity, the Watchers. I've talked about the demons that this particular one is trying to go with a woman, and going with a woman and having a kid with her, that is a hybrid between a human and a demonic angelic being, similar to when the Watchers went with Earth women and created the Nephilim. It mirrors that. Continuing. His most notable abilities commonly include prophecy and shapeshifting. Merlin matures to an ascendant, sagehood, and engineers the birth of Arthur through magic and intrigue. Later stories have Merlin as an advisor and mentor to the young King Arthur until his disappearance from the tale, leaving behind a series of prophecies foretelling events to come. A popular version from the French prose cycles tells of Merlin being bewitched and forever sealed up or deleted by his student, the Lady of the Lake, which I talked about in another video, after he fell in love with her. Other texts variously describe his retirement at the times, supernatural or death. Gorfey and his sources. Gorfey's composite Merlin is based mostly on the North Brythonic poet and seer Myrddin Wyllt, that is, Myrddin, the wild man, known as Merlinus Calendoniensis, or Merlin Sylvestris. In later texts influenced by Gorfey, Myrddin's legend has parallels with a northern Welsh and southern Scottish story of a mad prophet, Llai Locan, probably the same as Myrddin, son of Morfryn, mentioned in the Welsh triads. Blaio Shniampi, an Irish tale of the wandering insane king, Su Bin Mac Calmine, often anglicized to Sweeney. In Welsh poetry, Medrin was a bard driven mad after witnessing the horrors of war, who fled civilization to become a wild man of the wood, In the 6th century, he roams the Caledonian forest until cured of his madness by Cantidron, also known as Saint Mungo. Gorphy had Midrin in mind when he wrote his earliest surviving work, the Prophetane Merlini, Prophecies of Merlin, which he claimed were the actual words of the legendary poet, including some distinctively apocalyptic prophecies. For Gorphy's contemporary 12th century, however, the work reveals little about Merlin's background. Gorphy was further inspired by Emrys, Old Welsh, Embrius, a character based in part of the 5th century historical figure of the Romano-British war leader Ambrosius Aulrunius, Welsh name Emrys Weldig, also known as Murrid Emrys, when Gorphy included Merlin in his next work, Historia Regum Britanniae. He supplemented his characterization by attributing to Merlin stories concerning Ambrosius, taken from one of his primary sources, the early 9th century Historia Britannium, attributed to Nennius. In the later account, Ambrosius was discovered when the king of the Britons, Vortigern, attempted to erect a tower at Dinas Emrys, city of Emry. More than once, the tower collapsed before completion. Vortigern's wise men advised him that the only solution was to sprinkle the foundation with the blood of a child born without a father. Ambrosius was rumored to be such a child. When brought before the king, Ambrosius revealed that below the foundation of the tower was a lake containing 2 dragons battling into each other, representing the struggle between the invading Saxons, the White Dragon, and the native Celtic Britons. In the Red Dragon, Gorphy's retold the story of Historia Regum Britanniae, adding new episodes that tie Merlin with King Arthur and his predecessors. Gorphy stated this: Ambrosius was also called Merlin, hence Ambrosius Merlinius. It's interesting to see how this saga was written, how the story was unfolded, and the symbolism between the Anglo-Saxon invaders and the Celtic people. And I think that it's very interesting in seeing these origins. And basically, in my opinion, I like the Roman, how the Roman was used back then. Very interesting. Gorphy's account of Merlin's early life is based on the story from the Historia Britannium. At the same time, however, Gorphy also turned Ambrosius Runius into the separate character of Uther, Pendragon's brother. Aurelius Ambrosius. Gorphy added his own embellishments to the tale, which he set in Carmarthen, Wales. In Welsh, it is Caerfyrddin, while Nennius, fatherless, Ambrosius eventually reveals himself to be the son of Roman consul. Gorphy's Merlin is begotten by an incubus demon, Onenun, daughter of the king Dyfed, Demente. Today's South Wales, that's where it occurred. Usually the name of Merlin's mother is not stated, but it is given as Adhan in the oldest version of the Prose Brute, the text also naming his grandfather as King Conan. Merlin is born all hairy and already able to speak like an adult, as well as possessing supernatural knowledge that he uses to save his mother. The story of Vortigern's tower is the same. Underground dragons one white and one red, represent the Saxons and the Britons, and their final battle is purportant of things to come. At this time and point, Gorfy inserted a long section of Merlin's prophecies taken from his earlier prophetia, Merlini. Gorfy also told the further tales of the character. In the first, Merlin creates a Stonehenge as a burial place for Aurelius Ambrosius, bringing the stones from Ireland. In the second, Merlin's magic enables the new British king, Uther Pendragon, to enter into Tintagel Castle in disguise and to father his son Arthur with his enemy's wife, Egerna. These episodes appear in many later adaptations of Gorfy's account. As Lewis Thorpe notes, Merlin disappears from the narrative. Subsequently, he does not tutor and advise Arthur, as in the later versions. Gorfy dealt with Merlin again in his third work, Vita Merlini. He based it on stories of the original 6th century Merlin, set long after his time frame from the life of Merlin Ambrosius. Nevertheless, Gorfy asserts that the characters and events of Vita Merlini are the same as told in the Historia Regum Britanniae. Here Merlin survives the reign of Arthur, whose fall he is told about by Taliesin. Merlin spends a part of his life as a madman in the woods and marries a woman named Glendona, a character inspired by the male Gwendolio. He eventually retires to observing stars from his house with 70 windows in the remote woods of Rheinurk. There, he is often visited by Taliesin and by his own sister, Ganida, a Latinized name of Merlin's sister, Gwendide, who has become Queen of Combrians, and is also endowed with prophetic powers compared to Gorfy's own Historia. His Vita seems to have little influence on later portrayals of Merlin. Merlin as a Druid. Mark Travinsky hypothesized that Merlin is based on a historical personage, possibly a 5th or 6th century Druid living in southern Scotland. Tolstoy makes a similar argument based on the fact that early references to Merlin describe him as possessing characteristics which modern scholarship, but not that of the time the sources were written, would recognize as Druidical. The interface being that those characteristics were not invented by the early chroniclers, but belonging to a real person. If so, the hypothetical prototype Merlin would have lived about a century after the hypothetical historical Arthur. According to these sources,